Welcome to our video on the topic of LMIA Labor Market Impact Assessment. This video is designed to provide you with a comprehensive understanding of what an LMIA is, how it works, and how it affects your ability to work in Canada. Whether you're an employee, an employer, or just someone who is curious about the Canadian immigration process, this video will provide you with valuable information, what the requirements are, and how to go about getting one. We will also be discussing the cost of an LMIA in Canada, who will pay for it, and where to find job offers that require an LMIA. Additionally, we will go through the LMIA process step by step and talk about the LMIA work permit in Canada, the processing time, and the LMIA exempt work permit in Canada. Finally, we will discuss what the next step is after an LMIA is approved. So ensure to watch till the end. What are the requirements for LMIA? Before we go into the details of LMIA, let's first discuss what the requirements are for getting one. First and foremost, an LMIA is required for employers who want to hire foreign workers. This is because the government wants to ensure that the hiring of foreign workers will not have a negative impact on the Canadian labor market. In order to get an LMIA, the employer must first prove that they have tried to fill the position with a Canadian citizen or permanent resident, but were unable to find a suitable candidate. Additionally, the employer must also pay the foreign worker the same wage as a Canadian citizen or permanent residents would be paid for the same job. What is the cost of LMIA in Canada? Now, let's talk about the cost of LMIA in Canada. The cost can vary depending on the type of LMIA being applied for. For example, if the LMIA is being applied for a low-wage position, the cost will be $1,000. If the LMIA is being applied for a high-wage position, the cost will be $1,500. Additionally, there is also a processing fee of $230 for each LMIA application. Who will pay for the LMIA cost in Canada? The employer is responsible for paying for the LMIA. This includes the cost of the LMIA and the processing fee. The employer must also pay for the foreign workers' transportation to Canada and provide them with housing and other necessities. Where to find LMIA Canada job offer? If you are a foreign worker looking for a job that requires an LMIA, there are a few places you can look. One place to start is on the Government of Canada's Job Bank website, or canadacareersite.com, which lists job openings that require an LMIA. Additionally, you can also check with recruitment agencies that specialize in placing foreign workers in Canada. Here is the LMIA process step by step to work in Canada. Now, let's go through the LMIA process step by step. Step 1. The employer must first prove that they have tried to fill the position with a Canadian citizen or permanent resident, but were unable to find a suitable candidate. Step 2. The employer must then submit an LMIA application to Employment and Social Development Canada. Step 3. The application will be reviewed by an officer to ensure that it meets all the requirements. Step 4. If the application is approved, the employer will be given an LMIA number. Step 5. The foreign worker can then use the LMIA number to apply for a work permit. How to apply for an LMIA work permit in Canada? An LMIA is a document that is required for certain types of work permits in Canada. It is issued by Employment and Social Development Canada (EXPAT'S) and is used to assess the impact that a foreign worker will have on the Canadian labor market. The purpose of the LMIA is to ensure that the hiring of foreign workers will not have a negative impact on the employment opportunities of Canadians. There are two types of LMIA, a positive LMIA and a neutral LMIA. A positive LMIA indicates that there is a shortage of Canadian workers for the job in question, and that the foreign worker will not have a negative impact on the Canadian labor market. A neutral LMIA indicates that there is no shortage of Canadian workers for the job in question, and that the foreign worker may have a negative impact on the Canadian labor market. Once the LMIA is approved, the foreign worker can then apply for a work permit. The work permit will be valid for the same length of time as the LMIA. The foreign worker must also meet all the requirements for a work permit, such as passing a medical exam and obtaining a police clearance certificate. What is the LMIA processing time? The processing time for an LMIA varies depending on the type of LMIA and the specific circumstances of the case. Generally, the processing time for a positive LMIA is shorter than for a neutral LMIA. The processing time for a positive LMIA can be as short as 10 days, while the processing time for a neutral LMIA can be as long as 6 to 8 weeks. It is important to note that the processing time for an LMIA can be affected by a variety of factors, including the completeness of the application, the workload of the SDC, and any additional information that may be required. How does LMIA exempt work permit in Canada works? There are certain situations where a foreign worker does not need to obtain an LMIA in order to work in Canada. These are known as LMIA exempt work permits. Some examples of LMIA exempt work permits include 1. Work permits for intra-company transfers. 2. Work permits for NAFTA professionals. 3. Work permits for international students who have graduated from a Canadian post-secondary institution. 4. Work permits for certain types of seasonal agricultural workers. It is important to note that even if a foreign worker does not need to obtain an LMIA, they may still need to meet other requirements in order to be eligible for work permit. After LMIA is approved, what is the next step? Once an LMIA has been approved, the next step is for the foreign worker to apply for a work permit. The work permit application must be submitted to Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada IRCC, along with the LMIA and any other required documents. The processing time for a work permit application can vary depending on the specific circumstances of the case. Generally, the processing time for a work permit application is shorter than the processing time for an LMIA. In conclusion, an LMIA Labor Market Impact Assessment is a document that is required for certain types of work permits in Canada. It is used to assess the impact that a foreign worker will have on the Canadian labor market, and ensure that the hiring of a foreign worker will not have a negative impact on the employment opportunities of Canadians. The processing time for an LMIA can vary depending on the type of LMIA and the specific circumstances of the case. Thanks for watching.